during the course of being here, given what I do for a living. And one of the joys of the work that I'm doing, being in the position that I'm in, I get to meet a lot of different companies and a lot of them outside the industry. And it actually gave me a thought to create a new initiative called Framework Resources. Rather than coming to each of you one by one, I could just use this forum to go, hey, meet these guys. And the very first people I want to introduce at Framework Resources are my solicitors. I've been working with Simpsons for quite a long while now, actually. And two things that come out of it. I'm very guilty of, in the past, ripping contracts off of websites and using them from NDAs to looking at how a full SDA works. But I realised at a certain point, as you do, that you need somebody that actually knows what the hell they're looking at and how to understand that language, which is next to impossible for anyone else. I was introduced to Simpsons, and particularly Adam Simpson, who's about to come up here. And the joy of working with them is they get our industry. They're in the entertainment space, they get our industry. But even more importantly, these guys are gamers. And for me to relate to them made it so much easier. I have leaned on Adam a lot in the last 12 months with my ideas, thoughts and processes and really just with directions that I'm taking. And there is never a time where I've called him where he hasn't been on the phone to give me the advice that I need. So for the very first Framework Resources, please welcome Adam Simpson.
Wow, I figure a cheque should be in the mail for Tony. Tony, thank you for saying that. It's a pleasure working with you. Today I've been asked to talk about intellectual property, and I know through knowing some of you that you've all got varied experiences. So what I'd like to do is have a quick roll through some of the intellectual property elements that often appear in games, how they're protected, and also look at some common licensing structures. But then what I'd like to do is throw it open to you so you can say, look, Adam, that's all fine in theory, but in practice we get screwed over by the publisher anyway, so what do we care? The title here, Mine, is a reflection, I think, of the realities of the negotiating process between companies who use IP. Sometimes you have a crazy but motivated desire for all intellectual property to be held by the publisher, and speaking mostly to developers today, I'd like to start looking at whether there are points where you can say, yes, you do need that, but do you need this, this and this, which we might be able to segregate from what else you're doing and that we might build upon later. As Tony mentioned, we do work with games developers, and Chris, who's joined me today, down from the office, and I are both gamers. I fell in love with Space Invaders, particularly when I learnt that by jiggling the power cord very heavily you could get free credits, but since then been immersed in Battlefield Bad Company for far too many hours. Our background as lawyers is some 25 years. The firm's name is not after my name, that's a coincidence. I'm not actually 55. And we've done a hell of a lot of film, music and technology work, and the advent of the popularity of games just means that that expertise just comes to fit quite nicely with games work. So let's get rolling. Really what I want to talk about is, what are you creating? What is its future value, and who controls it? Because with that control comes the ability to earn for it. And my experience is there are kind of three types of things that you tend to create. There are ideas, there's the content, which includes everything from music to film sequences, and then the software. But in the course of today, really like to hear from you. Interrupt me at any stage and ask me about other forms of content that might pop up and how to deal with it from an intellectual property sense. The negotiation process is an important one. Sometimes, even if you don't see it at the time, lawyers, otherwise known as the dark lords of the professions, often sit there trying to fight out individual clauses, and there's obviously points where that becomes irritating and unproductive, but there are also occasions that can be very important. One of our animation clients was doing a deal with one of the big entertainment media companies, and they'd developed a character, and the entertainment company, Sony, was interested in using that character for a particular project, and we fought quite hard to say, yes, you can use it for that project, but we want to reserve our rights in relation to other aspects. And there was a point where my guy said, look, I don't care anymore, I'm over this, I just want to get the deal done. And we gave it one last shot, and Sony finally caved in. And 2 years later, there was great success with this character, and Sony had to come back to my guys saying, just checked our contract and seeing contrary to what we normally do, you seem to own this. And can we please renegotiate for some subsequent use? And it was great. And that was, I guess, one of the dreams in the negotiation process. But you just never know when it's valuable. Oh, too far. There we go. Firstly, ideas. Well, these are wonderful examples of ideas that then went through to fruition. And in themselves, ideas have potential value. And that is a point in the bargaining positions where you say, look, I've got this great idea, I can't develop it myself, I need your money, your expertise to do it. The other person says, exactly, you can't do it without me. And it's part of the negotiation process that leads to I guess, segregating the two inputs of people and finding the meeting point. Patents and confidential information are the tools that generally protect ideas and are your bargaining position at the first point. Patents can be fantastic, but beware, they are quite expensive and need to be carried out on a country-by-country basis. And even if you go to all that trouble to get them, do you have the money to fight off a major corporation who's infringing them? Confidentiality, you see it all the time with pitches. People doing pitches to developers or publishers have a great idea, and in a nutshell, the value only remains with your idea so long as you keep it confidential. And it doesn't mean you can't disclose it to anyone, but if you do, make sure you have an agreement built around that disclosure, which then gives you the protection. The other types of intellectual property that get created: content, images, whether it's characters, whether it's Darth Nihilus, landscapes, buildings, any of that. There's the music and sound effects, scripts, cinematic sequences. Even if it's just at the alpha stage, that's all intellectual property that has some potential value. Even when you're working on someone else's intellectual property, Lucasfilm saying, we want you to make a game solely centred on Jar Jar Binks, God help us. When you start building into that character, building around it, even giving it hats and things like that, you are still creating IP and needs to be considered. The next aspect is the underlying software, and Epic's Unreal Engine is perhaps a very good example of just how easy it is, sorry, that's perhaps an overstatement, just how valuable that underlying software can be. They decided not to keep it as a proprietary thing and keep it for their games, but to start licensing it out. And whenever you're developing anything, always have in mind that what you're developing could be used for something beyond the initial application. In other words, it can have an on-sell value. Now, protection of content and software gets its value from copyright and trademark laws generally. The starting point is, let's just take copyright, is that it's a collection of exclusive rights. If you own the copyright or control the copyright, you can essentially prevent other people from using it. And that's why licenses are so common.